Welcome back. Glad you're here. I told you before this program started, for those of you who were on the chat early, that this is my very favorite lecture of the entire Best Way program. That, of course, has to do with my profession as a colorectal surgeon. Tonight we are going to be talking about fiber magic. And of course we'll talk about whole grains, but what really matters to me as a colorectal surgeon is fiber, because fiber is just amazing. Fiber is something that we can avoid many of the common surgical issues that I see, and we'll see a list of those later on. So tonight we're going to talk about the many benefits that come from eating whole grains, and they are related not only to the vitamin and protein content, which we'll look at, but especially to the fiber content of whole grains. So, grains are pretty much the fundamental food in many cultures around the entire world. Over in the Far East, for instance, you're probably aware that rice is a staple of the diet. There's a few over in the Far East that also use millet, but we're all familiar with, of course, rice. Now in the Middle East, barley was the foundation of the diet. You might remember in the time of Jesus that a lot of barley loaves were eaten. When Jesus fed the 5,000 and he took the little lads' barley loaves, that would have been the common thing that almost everyone in that culture was eating for their main source of carbohydrates. It was barley. Over in Europe, wheat is probably the staple. You remember in Europe, a lot of breads. There's a lot of bread shops, and there's a lot of pasta, perhaps, down in Italy and in Spain. So wheat is the staple grain of Europe. Over here in America, perhaps you might remember that corn was a Native American food that was extremely common, and I just traveled to Michigan to give a health lecture the last couple days and saw lots and lots of cornfields up there in Michigan. Quinoa is another grain that is native to the Americas, and we don't think about it quite as much now, but it's making a comeback. You all are probably familiar with it. It's spelled Quinoa, so it looks like quinoa, but it's actually pronounced quinoa. And there's a picture of a couple different colors of quinoa there in the bottom right-hand corner. Now, whole grains have been the main food that throughout all history humanity has subsisted on. We call it the staff of life, and that's for good reason. Grains provide excellent nutrition. They're filled with complex carbohydrates, therefore they're a fantastic energy food. Remember we talked about that important curve where you slowly absorb the sugars from complex carbohydrates as opposed to what we eat now where we have these simple carbohydrates and we have those sudden spikes. So grains are good when they're whole grains as complex carbohydrates to give us energy. They're digested slowly and the sugar is gradually released. They're also actually an excellent source of protein. There's only one of those essential amino acids that they are low in, and that's lysine. But if we're eating a variety of foods, that is not a problem at all. They are a low-fat food. So if you're eating grains, you don't have to be worrying about your cholesterol, your triglyceride levels. They're also very high in fiber, which we're going to see is extremely important for preventing a large number of diseases. They're also a very good source, it turns out, of lots of different vitamins and a few minerals. And of course, they're low in sodium, which helps with those individuals who are concerned about their blood pressure. Here's a very simple diagram of a kernel of grain. There are three basic components you're probably familiar with. The outer surface is what we call the bran. This is the rough outer surface. It's usually brown. This is where most of the fiber and most of the vitamins also reside. Now the endosperm is that area on the inside that has most of those complex carbohydrates. This is what actually makes the grains into a high energy food. The endosperm is also what we use to make white flour. So in white flour we take away all the bran and all the germ and just use the endosperm. Now the germ is where the DNA of the grain is located, and it tends to be higher percentage-wise in protein, but as you see it's a very small part of the kernel. So let's look at the nutritive value of each of these different parts of the grain. Starting with the bran, the outside, that's only 14% of the entire kernel. But look at the percentages of these vitamins and minerals. 86% of the niacin, 73% of pyridoxine, and it goes down from there. Only 19% of the protein. So it's only 14% of the kernel, but it's extremely rich in vitamins and several minerals. Now the germ, as I mentioned, is only a very, very small portion of the kernel, but it's relatively rich in proteins and vitamins. Look at the 64% of the thiamine and actually 8% of the protein, although it's only 2% of the entire kernel. So in general, it's rich percentage-wise in proteins and vitamins. Now the kernel itself, the center of the kernel, the endosperm, is 83% of the entire kernel, and this again is a source of white flour. In white flour, we take away all the bran and all the germ. Those are separated and set aside for other uses like wheat germ, for instance. Now, white flour contains 70% of the protein, but it's very poor in terms of many of the vitamins that are found in the wheat there. Now, white flour, I don't know how many of you actually like white flour bread. I'll tell you briefly about something that my brother-in-law, who is a pastor in Michigan, he gave a cooking demonstration comparing whole wheat bread to white bread. This was just 2 nights ago. I was speaking on cancer up there. And he took a loaf of white bread and he smashed the whole thing down from something about this big down to something about this big. Then he took the thing out and wadded it up into a ball. And he said that in other settings, he didn't do this in the church sanctuary, of course, but he said in other settings he's actually taken it and thrown it at the ceiling and stuff. So it turns out that white flour makes very, very light bread, but it's missing a lot of things. As you can see, it's missing a lot of vitamins and minerals, although it may still have some protein. See, white flour, some people think it makes great bread, but it's very, very diminished in nutritional value once you strip out the bran and the grain. That bran and germ layer combined contains most of the phytochemicals in wheat. Here you see it has 95% of the ferulic acid, 83% of the phenolics, 79% of the flavonoids, and zeaxanthin, 78%. Come out about even on lutein, and the endosperm actually comes out slightly ahead with one of them, cryptoxanthin. So these are various phytochemicals, and as you can see, the bran and the germ layer actually have most of them. So here's the problem with processing. We were talking before this program started about the importance of eating foods as growing. As we process foods, you lose a lot of fiber, you lose some protein, you lose some vitamins, you lose some minerals. The only thing that's left is some starch, and air and heat, as bread or whatever sits on the shelf, you lose even more of the nutrients as it sits on the shelf. And you're probably familiar, the original reason that white flour and white breads were created is so you could lengthen their shelf life. And so that further diminishes the nutrient value. So that's a problem. Turns out that except for scurvy, you remember vitamin C deficiency causes scurvy, and the British Navy discovered you take a few lemons or some oranges on your trip and make the sailors eat them and scurvy is eliminated. With the exception of scurvy, all other vitamin deficiency diseases, such as pellagra or beriberi, they were only discovered when people started eating white refined flour that had had the bran and the germ stripped out of it. Now, nutritionists, being smart people, they eventually figured out this was because a lot of the vitamins were being stripped out of the grain. And so they decided we'll add back 4 of them to make sure we don't get pellagra and beriberi, and they added them back to the white flour. So when you go to the grocery store and you look up on the shelf and it says enriched flour, that's white flour where those 4 vitamins have been added back. Now, of course, multiple vitamins, probably 12 to 16 or more, have been stripped out. Most of the micronutrients and those phytochemicals have been stripped out, and we're only adding back 4. But marketers being what they are, we call that enrichment. I don't know, I don't feel very enriched if someone stole $20 from me and only gave me back $4. That just doesn't seem like enrichment to me. So here are the 4 that are put back, and you can probably see why. The first 2, thiamine and riboflavin, will prevent those 2 diseases we mentioned. And they also add back some niacin and some iron. Occasionally some folic acid will be added back as well. But dozens of vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, protein, and especially the fiber are still missing. So enrichment is not really enrichment, and enriched white flour is a horrible, poor substitute for whole grain flour. So let's look at some common whole grains now. Enough of what is bad, let's talk about what's good. Here's some common whole grains. Now wheat is probably the most common one that we're all familiar with. This dominates the whole grain scene. Contains large amounts of the protein gluten. And durum wheat's made into pasta, and other wheat is made into bread. There are even some hard white winter wheats. If you are one of those people that really like white bread and you like it to be a little bit lighter, you can still make whole wheat bread that is white by using white hard winter wheat. It probably doesn't have quite as many nutrients as the hard red winter wheat, but at least you will still be eating whole wheat and you'll get a bunch of the fiber there. So wheat is probably the most common grain we're all familiar with. Barley, as we mentioned, is common in the Middle East, and this was the oldest of the cultivated grains. There have been Egyptian mummies that have been found with necklaces of barley around them. Now this fiber is particularly healthy. It lowers your cholesterol, more effective even than oat fiber. So barley is a very, very healthy grain. And barley bread, I don't know about you, but I just love the flavor of barley loaves. It's just a wonderful, wonderful, hearty flavor. Corn, as we mentioned, is very common here in the Americas. It has the highest level of antioxidants of any grain or even any vegetable. It has almost twice the antioxidant activity of apples. Of course, unfortunately, in this country, you probably know that the majority of the corn that is produced goes to produce what? High fructose corn syrup. So corn, as we saw in a previous lecture, if you process it, it actually has a fairly high glycemic index. So make sure when you're cooking your corn, you don't cook it to death. And when you eat your corn, just be aware that it actually has a fairly high glycemic index there. But it's a very healthy thing in general. It has lots of antioxidant activity, and it's a good grain. Oats, like barley, have a special kind of fiber called beta-glucan, which is what lowers your cholesterol. Now they have some unique antioxidant properties as well. Avenanthramides, say that 3 times quickly. These help protect your blood vessels from the damaging effects of LDL cholesterol. So oats are very, very healthy for us. There you see some whole grain oats. And here's some picture of quinoa. As you saw on the previous slide, quinoa comes in a variety of different colors. And this whole grain provides a complete protein. It contains all the essential amino acids, and it is native to South America. Looks kind of like a sesame seed. Most of the time we see it in its already processed form, or the way I see it, it's already been soaked. And it makes for a very, very tasty addition to a cold salad, some soaked quinoa. We might have some more hints about quinoa from Rachel in our cooking segment. Rice, of course, very common. Whole grain rice is usually brown, but if you travel the world or if you go to one of the Asian markets, you'll probably find there's some black rice, there's purple rice, there's red rice, there's many different kinds of rice. And I'd encourage you to try a bunch of them. These whole grain rices each have a slightly different flavor, and they're very good. Now, similar to wheat, when you turn a whole grain rice into white rice, you strip off many of the nutrients that are found in brown rice, and all that remaining is that carbohydrate. Rye is a grain that we don't think of that often. It has very high levels of fiber, and it promotes a feeling of fullness because of that. It's a good choice for people who are trying to lose weight. This grain has high fiber in the endosperm also, and not just in the bran, which is a unique feature to rye. So we've talked about all these different grains. I'd encourage you to try some that are new that you perhaps haven't tried before. Let's talk about the effects of fiber on the colon. This is why this is my favorite lecture. What does fiber do in your colon? When exposed to water, fiber swells up and it becomes softer. Fiber, however, especially insoluble fiber, cannot be digested, and so it's passing all the way through your digestive system completely unchanged. What this does is increase the volume of a person's stool and increases the speed at which the meal passes through the digestive system. This reduces what we would call transit time. And if your transit time is low, there's less time for any toxins that happen to be in your diet to impact the wall of your colon. It has a helpful effect on your bacterial flora, and that bulk of fiber actually reduces the quantity of the food that is digested and limits the absorption of certain minerals. So that can be a helpful thing, especially if you're trying to lose weight. Now, less food digested means less calories to pack into the fat stores in your abdomen or your thighs, and so again, having a high fiber diet is going to be very, very helpful for those who are trying to lose weight. Now, there's a lot of diseases that are associated with a low fiber diet. In many cases, we can point directly to an obvious reason why that is. If you have hard, small stools, that is called a Bristol 1 stool scale. As a colorectal surgeon, when I started out in practice, I asked every single person who came in, I showed them a chart of stool, and I said, find your poop on this chart. And those who eat a low-fiber diet frequently have hard little balls, and that's a Bristol 1 stool, and it's very unhealthy for you. You have to strain to get it out, and that straining leads directly to hemorrhoidal disease. Enlargement of the hemorrhoids with bleeding, pain, swelling, prolapse, lots and lots of problems that keep me in business, but it doesn't have to be you. A straining and low-fiber diet also lead directly to diverticulitis. There are a few other causes of diverticulitis, but the most common one is probably a low-fiber diet. It turns out that as the colon is squeezing, trying to move stool through, if you have narrow stools, it causes what's called segmentation. Two different areas of your colon actually shut down, and the area in between, the segment in between, the pressure goes sky high as 85 millimeters of mercury. And it is that process that then causes those little outpouchings called diverticula to form on the sides of your colon. Similar process, you can get a fecalith at the base of your appendix, which can then lead to appendicitis. Low-fiber diets allow you to resorb more of the cholesterol, which is a contributor to gallstones. And a low-fiber diet is directly associated with cancer of the colon. Might have something to do with transit time. Probably has something to do with the fact that a high-fiber diet has lots of anti-cancer foods in it, but probably has something to do with transit time as well. As well, cancer of the breast is associated with a low-fiber diet. Here's some more diseases associated with a low-fiber diet. High cholesterol, because of course fiber is a good cholesterol-lowering food. A low-fiber diet also increases hardening of the arteries. And of course, hardening of the arteries and high cholesterol lead directly to heart attacks and strokes. Low-fiber diet increases your risk of developing diabetes, kidney stones, and obesity, as we mentioned, is a function of eating more calorie-dense foods, where a high-fiber diet is a low-calorie density food, which will encourage weight loss. So a low-fiber diet leads directly to lots of common and deadly diseases, including obesity. Here's one important fiber study. This was the Nurses' Health Study. Almost 70,000 women over 10 years. They tracked the fiber in their diet, and here's what was found. You could reduce your risk of a heart attack by those who are eating the most fiber compared to those who are eating the least amount of fiber by about 50%. Let's see, that would be 47% decrease. Now notice that that's only a group of women who are eating 22.9 grams of fiber per day. That is not even what's recommended. Most nutritionists would recommend for women 25 to 30 grams of fiber per day. And for men, I encourage them to eat 40 grams of fiber per day. Same study looking at fatal heart attacks, not just heart attacks in general. And you could reduce your risk of a fatal heart attack by 60%. Here's another important study. This is the NIH AARP Diet and Health Study. This was published back in 2007. Almost 500,000 people. They followed them for 5 years. They were from a lot of large cities in different states across this country. And there were about 2,974 cases of colorectal cancer during that time in this cohort. And your risk of being a colorectal cancer patient was decreased by the amount of fiber that was eaten. And again, look at these amounts of fiber. This is really not very much fiber in the diet. and you could probably reduce your risk of colorectal cancer further by taking more fiber into your diet. There's been some other studies that aren't nearly as large as this one that demonstrate that. So about a 30% decrease in your risk of colorectal cancer. There's a lot of different types of fibers, and you don't want to just get all your fiber from a Consul packet or Metamucil packet or a fiber gummy or something like that. I do tell my patients on occasion that they might need to take a fiber supplement, but there's so many different types of fiber, we're better off getting these fiber from plants and different types of food. In most grains, the fiber consists of an indigestible cellulose and hemicellulose. Now, cellulose remains quite firm in the digestive tract, and that's one of the things that helps kind of sweep out your colon. But there are also some insoluble fibers that we think are effective at preventing cancer of the colon. We know they're effective at preventing diabetes. The pectins are soluble in water, and they form a gel that's kind of soft and slick in quality, but they're still not digested. The soluble fibers are the effective ones at lowering your cholesterol levels, and they're also helpful, therefore, in preventing strokes and heart attacks. So lots of different types of fiber in different foods. Here's the bad news. In the United States, we do a very poor job at eating fiber. Here is data from the government about what Americans eat. Well, we eat about 28% of our calories come from meat, dairy, and eggs. And of course, animal products have no fiber. We get another 22.5% of our calories from fats and oil that are added into our diet. And of course, that has no fiber. 15% from added sugar, no fiber there. And refined grains have very little, if any, fiber. Only 11.2% of the calories that Americans eat comes from fruits, vegetables, and nuts, things that are good for us that actually have fiber. So if we can add more whole grain foods and more fruits and vegetables, it's really going to increase your fiber intake, and it's going to be helpful for you in so many different areas of life. It'll definitely decrease the risk that you will have to come and see me as a patient, which I think most of you would be in favor of. So let's look at the fiber in fruits here. Fruits are a pretty good source of fiber, and the berries, especially on the top of the list, are a good source of fiber. Notice that this is grams per cup. Michael, if you could help out with someone who needs to mute themselves there. This is grams per cup, and a cup of raspberries is actually a lot of raspberries, but it's also an excellent source of fiber. If you look at grams per 200 calories, raspberries are an even better source of fiber at 25 grams. I mean, that's almost all your fiber for an entire day if you eat 200 calories of raspberries. Raspberries are a very high fiber food. Now, all fruit has some fiber in it, as you see. Again, fiber comes from plant foods. All plant foods are going to have some fiber, but as you can see, some fruits have much more fiber in it than other fruits. I will even tell you that it is possible to eat a healthy plant-based diet and still not get enough fiber in your diet. I know this may come as a shock to some of you who have been eating a plant-based diet for perhaps years. It is possible to not get enough fiber. Even I don't get enough fiber in my diet some days. So if you sit down and add it up, you might be shocked at how little fiber is in some of the common foods that we eat. We probably need to eat some more raspberries and pomegranates there and not just grapes. Let's look at dried fruits. Now, of course, dried fruits, you can concentrate down the amount of fiber there, and so if you're looking at 1 cup of dried figs, well, you got 15 grams of fiber there, but that's a lot of figs. Most of us are not going to be eating that many figs. So anyhow, you can see the different amounts of food there. Dried bananas, if you're eating a whole cup of that, that's a great source of fiber. But interestingly, 1 ounce of raisins doesn't have as much fiber as you might think. Again, because remember, grapes didn't have as many fiber as, for instance, raspberries. Vegetables, of course, are also plant-based foods, and they, of course, also have fiber. Look at what's right at the top of the list. You've got your beans up there. Not all beans. Green beans are farther down on the list, but per cup, lima beans, acorn squash, green peas, even collard greens. These are excellent sources of fiber. Speaking of beans, let's look just at the beans, because they're not all created equal, but all beans are a good source of fiber. And if you want to be almost guaranteed to get the fiber you need in your diet, I would eat a serving of beans every single day. You can have baked beans, you can have rice and beans, you can put cold beans on your salads. Beans are an excellent source of protein, they're an excellent source of fiber, and there's so many different ways to eat them. If you ask me after the program, assuming none of you were eating at the time, I'll tell you about a very interesting way that I used beans, or I didn't, but my college roommate used beans to create a very interesting dish. Actually tasted pretty good, but it was pretty heavy, that's for sure. Well, as we wrap up, let's talk a little bit about prebiotics. Every whole plant food has a different type and amount of indigestible fiber, and we've deleted the entire section about probiotics and prebiotics. The punchline is, if you are eating a plant-based diet, you are getting all the prebiotics that will feed a healthy gut flora. So just eat a wide variety of plant foods, and this is going to help the good bacteria grow and compete and change depending on the fiber in your diet. So prebiotics are very helpful for you, and so we would recommend that you eat more whole grains. Use whole grain flour when you do use flour, and get a variety of whole grains. Don't just use wheat and wheat flour. Experiment with rye flour, barley flour, or some quinoa. There's so many different whole grains that can be healthy for us. Let's experiment and expand our horizons. Try some new foods that we know are healthy. Eat more high-fiber fruits and vegetables. Again, you could have a big salad with a lot of iceberg lettuce and things there, but unless you've added some cold beans, that large salad may not have as much fiber as you think it does. It can be very healthy for you. All those vegetables are healthy. Remember all the different colors we talked about, but it may not have as much fiber as you think. So actually check out the fiber content. And finally, to almost guarantee you're getting enough fiber in your diet, eat a legume every single day. One serving of beans in a variety of different contexts is going to be very, very helpful for you. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I am going to ask Michael to spotlight Dr. Elvin Adams, because we had a question for Dr. Adams that came in, I think, this week. Or if it didn't, it's because we did not get it last time. In fact, we've got a few extra questions here that I am going to address next time. But the question, Dr. Adams, I had for you this week was, how does the nutrient value of cooked or sautéed cabbage compare to raw cabbage?
Yeah. Well, I think the best thing to remember is that cabbage is more than 90% water. It takes like 2.5 cups of cabbage to equal 100 calories. And so raw cabbage doesn't have a lot of nutrients in it. It's mostly water. And if you're going to fix it up in some way, the best way to do it without damaging it is to steam it or boil it. If you start frying it and add oil or add other things to it, that's where you're going to be adding a lot of calories. And so raw cabbage, I like coleslaw. I like cooked cabbage very much. It has a very nice flavor to it if you add a little salt to it. But cabbage is a good low-calorie food. Just be careful what you add to it. And remember, no matter what you do to it, it's 90% water.
Got to unmute myself here. Thank you, Dr. Adams. I had one more question for you here. Did you want to give us, I don't know if you've decided yet what you're going to be speaking at our health celebration. If you have decided, do you want us to give us a little teaser for what that might be? Or do you want me to ask you that next week? You're muted there. If you are, there you go. You got to unmute yourself, sir. Dr. Adams, you're muted still.
I'm trying to decide between two topics.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask you next week. Maybe you'll give us a little teaser next time. Well, thank you. During this program, I just noticed that some of you are actually turning in your questions on the website. And so that is extremely helpful. I will get to all of those questions. Laura, if you want to spotlight yourself, I'm going to start by asking you a question, if you don't mind. Just add your spotlight to mine here. One of the questions that someone just turned in was the question, is walking in the morning better than the afternoon or the evening? So before you jump into your lecture, would you mind answering that question for us? Is walking in the morning better than the afternoon or evening?
Sure. Well, I am happy for you to be walking whenever you can walk and fit a walk into your schedule. However, it has been noted that walking and doing our exercise earlier in the day, especially if you are able to do it outside, has a lot of other benefits for us. It can help re-regulate our day-night sleep cycle. It can help us walking already helps a lot with depression and other things. And so, yes, I would encourage, if you have the time and have the flexibility in your schedule, to walk in the morning rather than just in the afternoon or evening. But I would encourage you to get out and walk.
Great, thank you. And we look forward to what tips you have for us about walking and interval exercise and stretching, or what do you have for us this evening?
Yes, tonight is a recap of everything we've done. So tonight is the last lecture that I have on exercise, but I want to just go through and recap with you where we've been and what we've learned throughout this time. So again, our goal for burst training is that we need to do, all of us need cardiovascular exercise. And that obviously helps pump our blood through our body, and it has the additional benefits you can see there on your screen. So we are always working to perform bursts of activity at higher intensity than what our normal pace would be. Hopefully, as you have begun exercising, hopefully your normal pace has a new normal and you are able to go at even higher intensity now to get that cardiovascular exercise. So how will we know that we're doing burst training correctly? It's through our breathing, our heart rate, and we should have difficulty talking in full sentences when we are exercising well at that good cardiovascular uh, degree. So burst training's principle is to hit it hard and take a break. Choose a form of exercise that you can do easily and safely. And always start with a warm-up, please, by walking at your normal pace for 3 to 5 minutes. After you have started with that warm-up, we add a burst going as fast as we can comfortably. And whatever pace that is, I'll take it, because as you do this more and more, your pace will change. That burst of activity lasts for, when we start, around 20 seconds to 30 seconds. But now you may be finding increases up to close to a minute long burst activities, and that's okay too. Our breathing, again, should be to the point that it's difficult to complete a full sentence, but another scale is the rating of perceived exertion. And 0 would be me sitting here in this chair resting. And all the way up to maximal is 10, where you're just all out racing as hard as you can. You're going harder than you've ever imagined. So we want to be kind of in that yellow to orange zone where we're breathing hard to really hard. But it's not making us totally exhausted just to do this burst. So again, we start at 20 seconds. We complete that burst by returning to a normal walking pace and continuing walking. Please don't stop when you finished a burst. You continue that burst to normal pace pattern 3 more times to 5 more times in your exercise session. And then you complete that exercise session, ending with a 3 to 5 minute cool down of walking at a normal pace. Again, our goal should be that anytime we've done a burst, our heart is pounding. We should know it by our heart and our breath. And we should be doing this 3 to 6 times a week. When we started, 3 times a week was a really, really good goal for us. But now that we are into the program well, working towards adding another session of the week until you have a total of 6 sessions a week of cardiovascular exercise is really, really good for you. Again, that we want that slow down, we want that cool off time where you're exercising gently through recovery, where you're catching your breath and you're taking the time to drink water and rehydrate yourself as you exercise. So we can increase the length of our bursts. We started at 20 seconds. We can add 2 to 5 seconds every time. So now you should be up to maybe 35-second long bursts, maybe even more. But it's okay if it takes you several weeks at a set length of burst before you're able to increase to another length of burst by another 5 seconds or so. That's okay. Take your time. Realize that each step you're getting better. So our goal is to increase our heart rate and then to allow our heart rate to slow down safely. Now, again, we talked about how breathing matters. I really like this slide because it's a great reminder to me of our birthday candle breathing, where you're breathing in through your nose, getting those lungs really filled by a deep breath through your nose, and then blowing out like you're blowing out all the birthday candles. And this will help you in your recovery time to recover faster. Again, we chose several variables that we are able to change. Only change one variable a week for your health and safety, but you can change the length of a burst session, how many bursts you are doing in an exercise session, how many days a week you're doing bursts, how fast you're passing those landmarks or the speed of your training, what terrain you're working with. In Tennessee, we've got a lot of hills to work with. So if you've been used to going on the flat, maybe find a walking route where you can go up and down a hill in your path. And then also you can change which cardiovascular exercise you are doing to further improve your health. Again, we talked about those same goals where we're working to keep consistent. We're working to normalize our breathing more quickly after each exercise. We're working for our heart rate to get back to its resting pace faster. And you should find a change in your heart rate when you're going to the doctor's office and getting your blood pressure taken. Your blood pressure should be decreasing. Your heart should be working less to pump that blood because you're getting a stronger muscle in the heart. We talked about basic stretching principles where your muscles are like rubber bands and you are working on holding that stretch at least 15 to 30 seconds for the larger muscles, to make sure that those muscles are really making a change through your stretch. Where you are stretching 3 times on each side, you're stretching gently. You're not bouncing or causing any tears in the muscles or tears in your eyes. And that you are watching your form carefully as you are stretching. Same thing with strength training, You are working to do strength training, watching your form, standing in front of a mirror, making sure you're breathing well through the work. So you are never grunting and groaning and really woofing to get your work done, but you are exercising only that one body part that you're aiming to exercise and holding every other body part still. And remember that as you're doing your exercise, you should not be in pain. Even with strength training, you should not be in pain. That tells me you are doing too much too quickly. So pain is a signal that something is wrong and we need to stop. We need to either decrease the amount of weight and try again, or if we're still having pain, we need to discontinue this exercise and try again in a few days, perhaps seeking medical help, depending on the severity of the pain. And then soreness, instead of pain, is a delayed reaction to your strengthening. That means that everything you're doing right. I had the opportunity to encourage someone else today in soreness that showed up a couple days after they started into something new in their routine. And that soreness means that something new was exactly what they needed in their routine so that they can continue on to the best health possible. Finally, we're trying to work with strength training twice a week, replacing those shrinking muscle fibers with strengthened muscle. We're making sure to do alternating days for different parts of our body, and that we are working in slow and rhythmic motions. And we are working on building an accountability team so that we can continue the improvements that you've already made in the last many weeks through this program. So I highly advise that you continue to work on finding what works for you exercise-wise, on reaching out to friends via the phone and connecting with them, finding times you can walk together or strength train together, and continuing to work at this together. I am so thankful to have been a part of your journey. I am glad that you all are on this journey and that we are seeing successes, and I look forward to hearing those in a few weeks on Saturday. I hope that we'll have lots of stories to be able to hear so that I'll know how this changed your life.
Well, Laura, I just really want to thank you for the time and effort you've put into this. If we were all together, we would all be clapping right now, but I'm on Zoom. It's a little hard to do that, but we just really appreciate you, your expertise, and the time that you are dedicating to this program. And I'm excited, as you said, to hear about how people are getting together in groups to exercise. So you have inspired us. I know that I've taken more walks with my wife because of this program, and I hope each one of you are getting together, as Laura said, in groups to exercise and finding within this program and in any other ways accountability. So thank you, Laura, again, and really appreciate your expertise. At this time, I think Chris Anderson has his internet back. Chris, if you want to spotlight yourself, we look forward to hearing your spiritual talk.
Yeah, well, good evening, everyone. Yeah, my internet quit, or a power blinked just as I was coming on last time, so sorry about that. Appreciate the lecture tonight on fiber. As Dr. Nelson was talking about rice, I ran to my cupboard and I got out this tub. I found some red rice at a store in Chattanooga. It's right by Thai Rain, little Asian store. They've got red rice and black rice. We love the red rice. It's just absolutely delicious. So just a plug for that there. I wanted to tell you about an amazing breakthrough. Scientists have discovered a revolutionary new treatment that makes you live longer. It enhances your memory, makes you more creative, makes you look even more attractive, keeps you slim, lowers food cravings, protects you from cancer, dementia. It wards off the cold and flu. It lowers your risk of heart attacks and strokes, and not to mention lowers your chance of diabetes. You'll feel happier, you'll feel less depressed and less anxious. Are you interested? It's sleep. Scientists have discovered that sleep makes such a profound difference in your life. And for some of us, it's even a life-saving measure. I was working two jobs after my wife and I, Faith, we got married, and I was working two jobs to make ends meet. I was working at Wendy's restaurant in the evening. I was a night shift supervisor, and I would close, and sometimes I would get done at midnight. And then my second job was making biscuits at Hardee's in the morning, and I'd have to be there at 4 or 5 o'clock, I can't remember, to get the biscuits ready for the customers coming in. And so there was a few nights I got 3 or 4 hours of sleep, and I was just dragging. Driving home one day, it was like a warm fall day. The sun was streaming through my window, and I just drifted off to sleep. And I drifted off the road as well. And I woke up just as my tire came off the side of the road. And I was going to hit the sign. So I jerked my steering wheel to miss the sign. And I went careening down an embankment and sliding toward this huge oak tree. And I just missed the oak tree. And I bounced over a driveway and slammed through a fence. I was wide awake at that point. Let me tell you, sleep is very important. Not just to keep us awake when we're driving, but it affects us in so many ways. There was some researchers that studied a group of overweight men and women for about a month. One group was given about 5.5 hours of sleep every night, and the other was given 8.5 hours of sleep every night. So weight loss occurred in both groups, but they lost it in two different areas. The group that got 5.5 hours of sleep, they had 70% of weight loss from their muscle mass. Not from fat. Now that's not good, because your muscle is what drives your metabolism. It kind of is the engine that burns up your calories. You don't want to lose muscle mass. And so the other group that got 8.5 hours of sleep, well over 50% of their weight loss came from fat while preserving their muscle. So sleep is really, really important. And I wanted to tell you about a Bible story that talks about sleep. Jesus had been with the disciples, and they had been very busy. This is in Mark chapter 4 and verse 36. They had been very busy. You know those times in your life where you're just busy, busy, busy. And Jesus was exhausted. They got into this boat, and they were going across the Sea of Galilee. And across the way, a storm came up. Now, we don't get a picture of what was happening with Jesus initially, but we find out the disciples, though trying to navigate the boat across through this storm, and the waves got bigger and bigger, and they began to crash over the edge of the boat. And initially, a little bit of water can get into a boat, not a big deal, but it began to get more and more water in the boat. They couldn't control it. The storm was just severe, and they were trying to bail the water out, and they couldn't keep up with the water that was coming in. soon this boat was going to sink. And it's interesting what the Bible says. In the midst of this chaos, the boat is now full of water. The Bible says, and Jesus was in the back part of the ship, asleep on a pillow. Like in all this, I mean, he was exhausted, right? But somehow Jesus was able to rest even in the midst of all this chaos. And the disciples woke him up and they said, Master, don't you care we're going to perish? And Jesus arose and rebuked the wind, and he said to the sea, peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. Now, there's two things I want you to notice in the story. Number one, Jesus was able to get sleep. Very important. And Jesus also had peace. He had sleep and he had peace. Those two things go together. In order for us to get rest at night, we all need to have peace. You may have stress in your life. It might be financial. It might have to do with some relationships or something in your life. I don't know, but there might be some lack of peace in your life and a lack of sleep, but they often go together. Well, I'm here to tell you that Jesus saved the disciples and he gave them peace in the midst of their storm so that they could have the rest that they needed. And Jesus wants to give you peace today so that you can have the rest that you need. How many of you want to have peace and rest that Jesus offers? Amen. Well, listen, I want to pray for you that God will continue to be with you throughout this program and that you'll have peace with him and that you'll be able to sleep sweetly. Let's pray together. Father in heaven, I just want to pray for my friends here. I'm just so proud of them. They've stuck it through 8 weeks now. We're almost to the end of the program. Amazing. 10-week program, and we're at week 8. Father, I just pray that you would give them strength each day, give them peace in the midst of the storms of their life, help them to rest in you, to trust that you love them just like Jesus loved his disciples. Bless them now, I pray, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you, Pastor Chris. Glad you're getting more sleep now than you were back then, although some nights I'm not sure. Pastor Chris is a very hardworking sort of guy. Rachel, we are so thankful you are here with us to share with us a recipe, and I think I might know what it is. Look forward to this.
I don't know if you know what it is or not. I might have switched it up on you. So tonight I'm going to share a recipe with you that is actually quite near and dear to my heart because it changed things for me, the way I look at how to cook. And I call it building a bowl. Did you get it right, Eric?
I think so.
You did? Okay. So this is something that we enjoy doing as a family. And it's, again, one of the things I absolutely love about it is that it's so very versatile. It gives you options. So you're basically doing 4 things. You choose a grain, you choose vegetables, and you choose a protein. And after you've chosen those 3 things, then you choose some type of sauce. So the first 3 are easy. Maybe the 4th one you have to work on a little bit, but we'll go ahead and I'll show you one of the bowls that I like to make. So first, the most important thing you've probably learned from us is choose color when you're choosing your vegetables. And you can see I have a lot of color there. One of the things I really like doing with bowls is using vegetables that are some that you can cook and some that are fresh. It's good to eat them both ways. And this gives you options, different textures, different flavors, and you can season things. For instance, I actually am allergic to butternut squash, but I absolutely love it. And the only way I can eat it is if I roast it, which sounds crazy, but it acts like poison ivy, which is horrible in my stomach. And so I have to make sure that I always roast it. And if I don't, then I pay for it. So that's one thing I will always cook when I eat it, but some people can eat it raw and really enjoy it. I love cauliflower. I love to put a little bit of curry on it and roast it with a little bit of salt. And again, we have these Silpat mats that I've talked about, the silicone mats that you could put on your baking trays where you don't have to add any oil at all. And you can bake these vegetables and just enhance the flavor of them. So as you can see here, I've chosen cauliflower and butternut squash. And then I have bell peppers and lettuce, cucumbers and tomatoes. And what I love about this is that you can switch it out for anything that you like and love. You can use potatoes, you could use broccoli, you can just do all different kinds of flavors. Pardon my clock as it's going off. I didn't get done fast enough. The second thing that I'm going to show you to do is the sauce. And this I'm using as my protein and my sauce. I'm going to show you how to make a homemade hummus. The first time I made hummus in a cooking school, I had a gentleman come up and he tell me, he's like, I don't like hummus. And I was like, well, why not? Why don't you like hummus? He's like, I don't know. There's just something about the flavor of hummus that I just really don't like. I was like, well, try mine and see what you think. And so he tried it. He's like, I've never had hummus that tasted like this. This doesn't taste like hummus. I'm like, no, this is what hummus is supposed to taste like. But the trick is, or at least with me, was the tahini in it. There's two different kinds of tahini, and a lot of people will buy the tahini that's roasted, and the sesame seeds have been roasted and then processed. The tahini that I like to use in hummus is raw, where they don't do anything to the sesame seeds except grind them up. And you can see this is the one that I got, where it just says mechanically hold sesame seeds, and that's all they've done to it, nothing else. And it really does, it can change the flavor of it. So those are the ingredients that you want to look for. Let's see if I can go back here. Okay, so all you're going to do here is you just need a food processor or a blender, and you can change this to the consistency that you like. You can make a very thin hummus, and you can make it so it's pourable for like as a salad type dressing if you wanted, or you can make it thick and creamy, and then you can enjoy it that way as well. The other thing I love about hummus is you can change the flavor of it significantly. As you've probably seen, they have almost, it seems like hundreds of different types of it in the store anymore. And I'll show you one of those in a minute. But you can add anything from jalapenos and cilantro to smoked paprika to curry powder to basil and tomato or sun-dried tomatoes. You can change the flavor profile so much just with something so simple, and this is so basic. So you can give that a shot anytime here too. Let's see. One of our favorites is the everything hummus. If I don't have time to make it, then I'll sometimes grab one of these, and this is a flavor our family really likes. And you cannot see the grain that I picked in here, but you can see that I put the bowl together, and I promise you there's quinoa under there somewhere. As I piled the vegetables on, you cannot see it. When choosing different grains, I always make sure that I buy all my grains as whole grains. I don't buy wheat flour. I don't buy barley flour. Part of the reason is because when you buy them off of the shelf, especially wheat flour, it's actually already starting to go rancid, because when you grind wheat up, the germ releases its fat, and the fat is what actually makes that go rancid quickly. And that's why a lot of people are like, I don't really like whole wheat bread. I promise you, because I've experienced this myself, if you grind the grains yourself, and it's very simple, you don't have to have special equipment for it. If you have a blender, you can do it with the blender. You can, it really changes the flavor, and you will be surprised at how much you absolutely love wheat bread. Some of the other grains that you could use in this is quinoa. We've talked about that and used that before in some of our recipes. Corn grits is one that we will often use, and for these, we'll go ahead and cook it with some ginger and some garlic and add that in there, and it's delicious. And steel cut oats you could use if you wanted. Bulgur wheat, barley, all of those you can find really easily in whole grain form in the store anymore. And another thing we really use a lot around here is rice and lentils. Rice and lentils get used in our family with the cauliflower, or just even making like a taco salad, we'll use lentils as our protein or our means there. And it just adds a lot of extra fiber, which is what we're looking for. And so try different variations of this. Another sauce that you could choose maybe instead of hummus is there's, I think on our website with Dinner with the Doctor, we have tahini sauces, we have peanut sauces, we have cheese sauces, we have all kinds of different dressings that you can try. We have some with cilantro and lime. There's all different things that you can try. And just really change it up and give yourself opportunity to try new things and find the flavor combinations that you love. I hope you get to try this, and thank you.
Well, thank you, Rachel. I really appreciate that. And I was guessing that there was going to be some quinoa underneath there, since that's something that we talked about tonight, and I know that's something that you do a very good job with. What are some other uses of quinoa that you like to use in your family?
So one of the ways I've recently discovered that I absolutely love it is for breakfast. And it sounds crazy, but I have an Instant Pot and I'll throw quinoa in the Instant Pot and maybe with just a little extra liquid to it to kind of make it a little bit more, break the grain down just a tiny bit more. And we'll make a strawberry sauce and put strawberry sauce and vegan yogurt on it. Or we'll do like sauteed apples or applesauce on it. And it's really good. I was really surprised at how much I liked that. And I think we also shared the sweet potato and quinoa dish, I think earlier on. That's another thing that we actually really like it into.
Interesting. Now, is there something you have to do special with quinoa so it doesn't taste bitter?
Rinse it.
Rinse it? How many times do you rinse it?
I just rinse it till it stops looking like it has bubbles. So it can take anywhere from a minute to 3 minutes, but always rinse it no matter what. Even if it says it's triple rinsed, rinse it anyway.
Okay, good. Well, thank you again so much. At this time, we're going to be going into our small group breakout sessions. I think Michael already has us all assigned. I don't believe I had any more announcements. I know some of you had some questions that you put on the internet, and some of you had questions you put in the chat. I don't have the answers right now, but I will get you the answers to your questions. So keep turning those questions in, and we will address the one about calcium next week. And David, I did see your question about stopping smoking, and I will get you that information here at some point once I'm able to get it. So at this time, we'll go to our breakout sessions, and we'll close the evening from there. God bless each one of you. Good night to your breakout sessions.